Welcome everyone to Navigating Disability Benefits with Growth Support presented by the International LGG Registry. The presentation will be given by Rachel Garcia Fox and moderated by Dr. Elizabeth Claus. This program is hosted by the Blum Resource Center. Over at the Blum, we are grateful for this continued partnership. The recording of this session will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist and our Blum Digital Resource Center. For those of you watching live, if you have any questions related to today's program, please feel free to utilize the chat and Q&A feature throughout the session. At the end of the session, your questions in the chat will be used to moderate the Q&A. If you have any other questions or would like more information about resources and programs offered through the Blum, please visit our website, www.dana-farber.org/resource center, or email us at blum_center@dfci.harvard.edu. Thank you all for joining us. I will now introduce Dr. Elizabeth B. Claus. Dr. Elizabeth B. Claus is a renowned professor and director of medical research at Yale University of Public Health, as well as an attending neurosurgeon and director of stereotactic radiosurgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. As a board-certified neurosurgeon, she specializes in treating meningioma, glioma, acoustic neuroma, and brain metastases. Dr. Claus is actively involved in cancer and genetic epidemiology, focusing on developing risk models for breast and brain tumors. She leads various research projects, including the Meningioma Consortium and the International Low-Grade Glioma Registry, which aims to understand and develop LGG and its impact on daily life. Recently, Dr. Claus and her team secured funds from the National Cancer Institute for the Optimum Project, investigating the molecular evolution of LGG by enrolling 500 participants with comprehensive genomic characterization of glioma tumors over time. Now I'll pass it over to Dr. Claus.
Thanks very much, and welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where and when you are watching this. And just for folks to know that we are taping this, your pictures will not be shown, but we're going to save it to our YouTube channel so that people can watch this again or at a later time. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ms. Rachel Garcia Fox. So we were able to meet Ms. Fox as part of the patient enrollment process for our low-grade glioma registry and Optimum. The folks in the neuro-oncology team in particular at Dana-Farber and Brigham and Women's have been wonderful in letting us approach their patients. And through that service, we were able to meet Ms. Fox. So she essentially runs and has founded the Neuro-Oncology Wellness Program at the Center for Neuro-Oncology, which is at Dana-Farber, and also is the founding program manager and patient navigator at GROW, which stands for Glioma Specialists Reaching Out with Support at Dana-Farber. She is an amazing resource and asset to the clinical population there. And actually, although she works with all neuro-oncology patients, has a specific interest in unmet needs for IDH mutant glioma patients. So we're very excited that she's going to talk today about navigating disability benefits. And this is one in what we hope will be a series of service-oriented webinars for brain and glioma patients, which we're in part able to put on now because we've received some nice funding from NIH and the Moonshot effort. So Rachel, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Claus, I'm happy to be here today, and thank you everyone who's joined for the talk. Just a little bit about the International Low-Grade Glioma Registry that Dr. Claus runs. It's funded by the National Institutes of Health, includes persons initially diagnosed with a grade 2 or 3 glioma, and currently aged 21 to 79 years with confirmed pathology. There are no restrictions with respect to sex, gender, race, date of diagnosis, or place of residence for eligibility, and patients can come from anywhere, the web, social media, hospital-based. So it's a fantastic project. I have been honored to work side by side with one of Dr. Claus's research coordinators and assistants, and we're happy to have this study open and patients enrolling in our center too. So more information later on how you can sign up if you aren't yet involved. And now we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a little background here on the Grow Support Program. Thank you, Dr. Claus, for giving a little overview, but I just wanted to clarify for everybody. So the Grow Initiative provides care navigation services, resource assistance, and peer-to-peer support to individuals who are diagnosed with lower grade gliomas who receive their care at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute or Center for Neuro-Oncology. So it's a fantastic program that we're really excited to be offering at the Center for Neuro-Oncology. If you are a patient at Dana-Farber at the Center for Neuro-Oncology, or a family member of someone who is, and you think they might be interested, we will have our contact information later on, and please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to connect. Just a brief overview of the talk today. So we're going to be talking about the programs that support people who are not able to work. So we're going to have a presentation, and then this will be followed by a Q&A session. I know it's already mentioned, but just to reiterate, please, we want this to be interactive. This is a conversation, so please enter any questions that you have in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and at the end of the talk, we're going to go through some of them. What is a disability? This is a complicated question. There are actually many definitions for a disability. The CDC defines a disability as any condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for the person to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. We're going to keep this definition in mind today as we move forward. You may have your own definition for the word disability that you may or may not identify with. But I like the CDC's definition here because it really focuses on this functional aspect. Difficult for the person to do certain activities. And it's general. It may be different for everybody. In the Grow Support Program at Dana-Farber, we help individuals at varying stages in their life and brain cancer journey. It's common for employed individuals to take time off from working to receive and recover from treatment at initial diagnosis or in the setting of a recurrence. We also see symptoms like seizures and neurocognitive deficits, the short and long-term side effects of treatment, and the difficult emotions of brain cancer survivorship impacting patients' ability to fulfill the responsibilities of their job roles. Our recent team review of the unmet needs in GROW participants showed that just under 50% of our grade 2 or 3 glioma patients are actively working full-time. So this means that a great portion of our population is either on temporary or permanent leave from working. Through the GROW initiative, we help our patients navigate the identification of and the application to various programs that provide financial support to brain cancer patients who can no longer work as they once did. Today, we're going to go over a few different categories of information with regards to various disability programs. One category of information is eligibility. Another is the application process. There's also the qualifications to receive benefits, which is different from eligibility. And then there's actually receiving the benefits and disputing denials if a denial is received. Today, we're going to focus on the first two, confirming eligibility and applying. We find that these two categories are kind of crucial to understand to actually benefit from these programs. So that's why we're going to be focusing on it today, on these two today. As Dr. Claus mentioned, you may have future webinars on the other two categories or going more in depth on these two. So please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat or at the end when you see our emails. You can send us an email about any topics that you are hoping to learn more about. The two questions we're going to try to be able to have you answer at the end of this talk are, am I eligible to apply? And what is the application process? So we're going to talk about several programs that help people who may be experiencing a disability. And we'll be speaking on these two categories for all of them. I do want to put a disclaimer out there before we get started. This information is meant to be general and a bit of an introduction. So for any specifics or for a situation that you might be in, if you have a question about, a particular program for yourself, it is likely that you will want to go to the original source or the program. It may be, a website if it's a government program, it may be somebody in your employer's office, but please do keep in mind that we are providing a kind of high level overview today, and that everything should be, verified or double checked with the actual program or service that you are thinking of maybe applying for. All right, we have a lot to get through today, but I do want to put something in the chat real quick just before we get started. I want to make sure that everybody who's here today is able to get follow-up information about this stuff that we talked about today, but also future talks on the topic if we do any. So there's a link I just put in the chat to everybody. You can enter your email and your first and last name, and then you'll be able to sign up for our notifications. All right, and I'll also put this in the chat at the end of the talk. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We got a lot to get through today. It may be, a lot, maybe a bit overwhelming, but we will, like I said, have some follow-up information to hopefully make this a little bit more digestible. All right. So these are the programs we're going to be discussing. There's unemployment insurance, Family Medical Leave Act, the short-term or long-term disability insurance programs, Supplemental Security Income or SSI, and Social Security Disability Insurance or SSDI. We're going to start with the first one, unemployment insurance, or UI for short. So what is unemployment insurance? Well, the Federal Social Security Act of 1935 created state-run unemployment insurance programs across the U.S. that pay recently unemployed individuals an amount based on their recent past earnings. So this is a program that provides financial support or paycheck replacement to people who are recently unemployed. That's kind of a key piece because there are sometimes windows that you need to be within. Let's say you stopped working a week ago. There may be like a 10-day window, for example, where you need to apply within a certain window. So that is kind of a key eligibility piece, recently employed. Through no fault of your own. So this is the first eligibility, recently unemployed through no fault of your own. Fulfill the state-determined base period of time worked, and fulfill all other state-specific criteria. So this, again, is a federal program, but is state-run. So all of the eligibility requirements are specific to the state that you live in. I want to give a little bit of an example today. For Massachusetts, for example, the eligibility requirements are that you've earned at least $6,000, rounded down to the nearest $100, during the last 4 completed calendar quarters, so about a year, and 30 times the weekly benefit amount that you'd be eligible to collect. I highly recommend, if you are living in Massachusetts or in any state for that matter, that you go to their website to look at this criteria. They may even have a tool that helps you understand if you're eligible or not. And for the application, it's a similar thing. I think, going online to find the application is a really great place to start. If you can't find the information about eligibility or about where to apply, try a phone number. And when you are doing this, you can simply Google the state that you live in, unemployment, and look for a .gov website for unemployment insurance. And hopefully you'll be able to find something fairly easily. With Massachusetts, if you go to mass.gov, there's the Department of Unemployment Assistance. If you scroll down, you'd see unemployment insurance, UI for workers. And it'll pull up this page. If you click on it, log into UI online, boom, this is what it's going to look like. It's a federal program, again, so they're asking for your social security number. And basically, you will log in, it will walk you through the application. Through Grow, I do help patients kind of go through this process. I think it is really helpful if you don't have a care navigator or a case manager to find somebody who's willing to sit down with you and go through an application. This goes for all the programs we're going to discuss because it can be a lot. There are a lot of questions, and it's helpful to kind of know exactly what information they want and to make sure that you do a thorough job. So I think it's helpful to have emotional support, and it's helpful to have the actual, tangible support of thinking about, okay, what do I need to put in here, and to have somebody to help you go through all of that. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the Family Medical Leave Act. Family Medical Leave Act was signed into law in 1993, and it permits eligible individuals to take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave from work to care for a loved one or for themselves without fear of losing their job. So this is the one program we're talking about today that is actually not financial support. It is simply providing job security. It is, however, a crucial piece to taking leave from work. If you are taking leave through a program that provides financial support, you also will be filing likely for FMLA to get that job security. And as it says here, it's for people who are experiencing the disability, and it's also for the loved ones or the caregivers of those people. That's crucial, I think, for people who have brain cancer or have lower grade gliomas. You may have to get radiation, for example. If you're going to radiation treatment every day and you have to drive, maybe you're not currently driving, you have a caregiver, let's say, that's willing to do it, but they have work. Maybe they need to take FMLA, or they want to think about taking FMLA to support you during that time. So just moving forward, that's something to keep in mind, that this is also a program for caregivers. Eligibility. You work for a covered employer. A covered employer really is most employers. There are some restrictions on like business size. If it's a really small business, it may not be covered. If you work for a covered employer, it means that you essentially benefit from this law. And you've worked 1,250 hours in the past year, and you've worked for the employer for a total of at least 12 months. So cumulatively a year in the past 7 years. Okay, so it can be time that you've worked at a business or an employer spread out across 7 years, but the total needs to be 12 months. Again, a covered employer, there are more details. If you have questions about it, I highly recommend going to the FMLA website. They have some really great resources, and we will provide some supplementary resources moving forward, but most employers in the United States are covered. The application process. First thing you're going to want to do is notify your supervisor or human resources department as soon as possible. So they recommend 30 days. That's ideally you would be able to give your human resources or supervisor 30-day notice. It's not always possible though, so just do the best you can. We've had patients who decide on one day they need to start their leave and they file that day, or they file retrospectively. So there are workarounds, but as soon as possible is ideal. There is certification paperwork sometimes for FMLA. There is not always certification paperwork. So this is one of the few programs that maybe doesn't always have it required. If it is required, your employer is going to provide it. And this is going to be something that you would fill out likely partially yourself and partially by one of your medical professionals, or with a medical professional, or one of your the members of your medical care team. And then you await for confirmation or approval. So you would get that FMLA designation, and it would basically be saying, okay, you have the job security for this period of time. And typically, I would say, human resources or a third party company that works for your employer is actually going to file FMLA for you. And as we move forward, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's technically the more common way of doing it. And I'll explain a little bit more why as we move forward. So next up, we're going to talk about the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. Now, just a quick disclaimer. This is a program that is only right now active in the state of Massachusetts. So in January 2021, this program started helping people in Mass take paid time off from work. So this is a newer initiative in Massachusetts, and I have heard that other states may be implementing it, something to keep in mind. So again, for caregivers or for family members of people who have a medical condition, or for a person who themselves has a medical condition. Eligibility. You're a covered employee and you earn at least $5,700 or $6,000, depending on the year, dollars in the previous year. A covered employee, typically for PFMLA, even more businesses and more employment kind of structures are covered. For example, self-employed individuals can actually enroll in PFMLA. There's a way to sign up, and this may be in our supplemental materials if you're interested in learning more about that. So for the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, very similar to the FMLA, you're going to notify your supervisor or your human resources department. You're going to complete an application with your employer, typically, sometimes through the state. And then you're also going to complete what's known as a certification of a serious health condition. So this last piece is not optional, like with the FMLA. This is something that is required if you're applying for PFMLA. You will complete the certification partly by yourself, and partly you will have it completed by your medical care team. So this is something that is really useful to discuss at a visit. If you have a visit, talk about it, bring the form. You can find it online. There's a screenshot here of it. You can see there's kind of different parts, right? There's parts that's for the employee on the left in the blue. I know it's very small, but I just wanted to give you an idea. And then the red piece here is for the healthcare provider. So if you are, even if you're thinking about taking paid family medical leave, bring this to your doctor or to your loved one's doctor and make sure that you talk about it with them or give it to them. And typically most healthcare providers are accustomed to doing this kind of thing. If you go on the mass.gov website for PFMLA, you will see there is a ton of information. Again, it can be a lot to look through by yourself. I highly recommend, if you're thinking about doing this or you have any questions, get a family member, get a friend, just say, hey, I'm trying to think about this. I want some more info. Do you mind? Like, it's really helpful just to have somebody there, either for moral support, because sometimes this stuff can be emotionally challenging, or just to help you really like absorb all the information. Another set of eyes can't hurt. Now we're going to talk about short-term or long-term disability insurance, STD or LTD for short. Short-term and long-term disability insurance programs provide income replacement if you're unable to work as deemed by a medical professional. It's common actually to be automatically enrolled in these programs through your employer. So unlike the previous three kind of programs we discussed, UI, FMLA, and PFMLA, which are federal or state programs, these are private programs. These are insurance that you are enrolled in either directly through your employer or through a third-party company. Eligibility, it varies. It's going to be very specific to your employer or the third-party company that is offering this benefit, and is also going to be specific to the plan. But an important piece is that you're enrolled as a part of your employee benefits. And you don't need to be at a point where you need to go on short-term or long-term disability to figure out what your benefits are. You may be enrolled in programs right now that you aren't even aware of. I highly recommend for anybody that has a lower grade glioma, just get the information. It may even be on a portal in your for your employer. If you have an employee portal, you may even be able to find it without talking to anybody. But if you need to message HR, for example, or give them a call to say, hey, I'm just wondering, what are my short-term and long-term disability benefits? It is highly likely, if you work for a business, that you are automatically enrolled in one of these programs. And then, do you fulfill your unique employer and plan eligibility criteria? Again, it is per plan and per employer. An example, though, is like the amount of time that you've worked. Sometimes they have like a very short window, after a week, you're going to be eligible. Sometimes it's going to be, a couple of weeks or maybe even longer. It just does depend. But one of the things that I wanted to mention about these benefits, short-term and long-term disability, is that they're usually taken in conjunction with both FMLA and, if you live in Massachusetts, PFMLA. So what that means is that you're going to have the job security from FMLA, you're going to have the paid benefit from paid family medical leave if you're in Massachusetts, and then you would also have the short-term and the long-term, or the long-term disability, depending on what you're doing, to kind of supplement. So in Massachusetts, it's very common to actually be made entirely whole. What that means is your entire paycheck is going to be made up for during your time off. And another thing, important thing to mention is just that short-term usually turns into long-term. Like if you're going on leave, for several months and you decide, oh, I really need more time, you'll kind of go through like a reassessment. They may have you do, another certification or have your doctor send in a note or something, and they'll do a redetermination to extend your short-term disability to long-term disability. So applying, again, it's very similar to the previous two that we looked at. You're going to notify your supervisor as soon as possible, fill out, return the certification paperwork that's likely required, and then you'll await confirmation for approval. The next two programs we're going to discuss are supplemental security income and Social Security disability insurance. These fall under the umbrella of Social Security Assistance, or SSA. They are Social Security federal taxpayer programs. Social Security disability insurance, SSDI, and supplemental security income, SSI, are federal Social Security assistance programs. And they originate from the Social Security Act of 1935 that I mentioned earlier. First, we're going to brush on SSI. SSI is for individuals who have little or no income and also have little or no resources or things that you own. And you have a disability or you're older than 65 years old. The process is checking your eligibility online or over the phone. So ssa.gov, you can see here is this little URL. Incredibly useful. I will say it's one of the better websites for this type of thing. It's well organized. There's a ton of information, but there's also a screener that you can do where you can see, am I eligible? And that's helpful because sometimes you might spend all of this time getting ready to apply and you realize, oh, I'm actually not eligible. So they make sure that they have enough resources for people to verify whether they're eligible to apply or not before going through all of that. And there's actually a kind of longer form, a 5 to 10 minute online form that will help you give them a little bit more information than just the sort of simple eligibility stuff. And then this will actually result in you kind of getting signed up for additional help. So somebody, if you decide to go that route, somebody will help you with your application. So that's why I have 2A and 2B here. If you want the help, you can go down that route. And again, if you go to the ssa.gov website, you'll see where you can do this. I think it's fairly intuitive on the website. And then 2B is just that you would do it yourself. You would complete and submit the application on your own. The last program we're going to talk about today is Social Security disability insurance. So eligibility would be that you've worked enough and recently enough and you've paid taxes and that you have a qualifying medical condition or disability. SSDI is one of those programs that has their own definition for what a qualifying medical condition or disability is. They have their own definition. For grade 1 and 2 glioma patients, this is not one of the qualifying conditions. So the diagnosis alone isn't going to get you the approval. You will have to justify it based on your functioning, your functional status. For grade 3 and grade 4 glioma patients, people with grade 4 and grade 3 gliomas, they are automatically in the bucket of qualifying medical condition or disability. They would qualify if they're eligible otherwise for the benefit of SSDI. So this is something to keep in mind. And it's something we may discuss in the future. If you have any questions or you want to talk about that more, please don't hesitate to send us a question in the comment in the chat today or an email later on. So worked enough or recently enough to pay taxes. This criteria is actually really called work credits. Like you have enough work credits is the language that they would use. And this is something we'll probably send out with our supplementary kind of resources around this talk, what exactly work credits are and how you can determine whether you have enough. The application process. First step, gather your documents. There are a lot of documents and there's a lot of information required for SSDI application. You're going to want to go on the website, ssa.gov, find the disability insurance page, and get the checklist. And this is something we can also link later on for the documents and the information that you need before you apply, because it is a lot of information and it will take time to get all of it together. So I highly recommend getting all that together before you sit down to do this. Then you will complete and submit an application. Again, have somebody do it with you. Maybe they're just sitting there, or maybe they're actively helping you fill it out. It's worth having somebody support you through it. It is a long application. Do it online if you can, okay? Because then you will get updates via the online system and maybe email. You don't need to worry about losing, a piece of mail. If you have access to a computer or you can go to a library, I highly recommend doing it online. And then you'll wait for confirmation that you meet the basic requirements. So basically the eligibility. So they have this kind of eligibility confirmation that they will do. And then the disability determination decision. And that's the one about the qualifications that I was discussing earlier, the functional changes, for example. That is the disability determination decision. It can take a long time. Typically, I believe 6 months is kind of what the Social Security office says. It can be longer, it can be shorter, but it is, a long process, a lengthy process. Just to show you the SSA.gov website, it's again a really good website. So like right here, you can see check eligibility. So you'll be able to see, am I eligible before you put any work into this. You can even get an estimate of how much money you would be getting. And then, applying online and checking your application are very easy if you go through the online route. Today, we talked about a lot. I know I talked fast, but we got through all of it. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with me today. And if you have any questions, you can watch the video that will be uploaded just about what we talked about today. If you want to go over it again at any point, we will have an uploaded video. These are the programs that we discussed. And, we went over eligibility and applying, but again, there's the qualifications, there's the receiving benefits and disputing denials. These are these other kind of buckets of info. Any questions on those, please do email us. These are our 2 emails here, about maybe future talks you'd be interested in seeing on these topics. We may expand this beyond just this talk. And then I just also wanted to include this slide here from Dr. Claus about the low-grade glioma registry. This is about how you can join the registry. So they have an awesome website. It's one of my favorite websites, I think, for a research study, if not my favorite.
This is why Rachel is our friend.
So you guys can just type in gliomaregistry.org, and the rest is pretty self-explanatory. It's an awesome program.
So thank you so much, Rachel. We do have a bunch of questions, so I will go through them. So one question is, I'm currently on disability, Social Security, DI, but feel like I could work a little bit, but not full time. So there's a lot of conflicting information about how much you can work without losing benefits, or at least receive a reduced amount. Where does one go to find the true answer?
A great question, and an important one. If you're ready to go back to work, you want to try and find a way to do it. I think it's an important step, and it is scary having the possibility of your funding kind of going away. So the best place to go for this really is your local branch. And the reason that I say that is find somebody who is an expert in this, who is a person that you can talk to. Once you get somebody, like a navigator like me, I can guide you to a resource, but you really want to get someone who knows this information, because this is what they do every day. So you can literally Google to find the Social Security branch nearest to you. And you can try by calling the first time, see if you can get somebody on the phone. It's going to depend who you get, how the conversation goes. But if you do get somebody who knows the answer to your question, you should get it right there. They should have very clear kind of limits on either the time that you can work, the amount that you can make, and what it would mean for you. And the other option is going in person. I know it sounds outdated, but people do it. And I've heard from patients who, they can't get an answer over the online system. They can't get an answer over the phone. They go in person and they meet the right, expert that helps them walk through everything with their case. So I would start with your local branch.
So another question, and this relates to something I know you and I've talked a little bit about, Rachel, is how can patients, especially with grade 2 glioma, and you were saying that that's not an automatic definition, in terms of disability versus the grade 3 and 4. So how can patients work with their healthcare providers to better support their case?
This is a fantastic question. It is a challenging one too. I think it's very important to talk transparently with your providers about how your diagnosis impacts your life and specifically your functioning. This is what they're going to be looking for a program like SSDI, for example. They're really looking to see all of the different domains of function. So not just, neurological and physical, which you may have evaluated with a neurological exam and a physical exam at your visit with a neuro-oncologist or a neurosurgeon. They're also looking at things like your psychosocial well-being, your emotional well-being. They're looking at your neurocognitive function. They're looking at, your ability to fulfill your tasks in whatever roles that you have, either in work or, in your home life. And what that means is we need documentation that says, these different areas are impacted by my diagnosis. And it's something that they can be given as a kind of proof in a way. So I always recommend having the conversation transparently with your provider, whoever it is. Tell them, I'm thinking about applying for this. These are the things that bother me. Can we talk more about this? And can you also please put it in your note? And that's okay. That's okay to ask. It's a good thing to say it out front. This is something that's really hard for me in my life. I know, maybe it's not something we talk about, but it is related to my diagnosis. It would be a huge help if you could put it in your note, when you're writing this up, if you could put this conversation in the note. That's kind of an example of a way to do it. I think also, seeing supportive care providers is another thing that can really help your case. If you see a specialist, let's say you have a migraine disorder, or you have, refractory seizures that, you can't stabilize with regular treatment, or your seizures have come back, go and see a specialist, a neurologist who specializes in that area. And then that note will describe, record that symptom that you're having. And that's an example, like seizures are a great example of something that I think really do strengthen an SSDI application.
Yeah, and those are all great tips. And I would also endorse speaking with the physician. I know when I am writing a note, my goal in part is to offer hope to the patient. And sometimes, you may say something, the patient is doing great, because the patient will then view the note and you want them to sort of view the interaction positively. But sometimes by saying that, you have hurt their cause at obtaining some of these benefits. So a conversation together about this is what the note will include, this is why, between the patient and the caregiver, I think is super important.
Thank you, Dr. Claus. Yeah, that's a really great point. It's a helpful insight too. I think it's helpful to think about how providers are understanding us and documenting us as patients. So being open about it, both on your end and from the patient, is really important.
Absolutely. So another question is, what do you do for health insurance if you have to be on disability?
So this answer to this question is going to vary. It depends what type of disability that we're talking about. If we're talking about short-term or long-term disability that you're getting through a third party or through your employer, typically you will continue to be enrolled in your employer's insurance if that's what you were doing while you were, working. So in those cases, you're kind of guaranteed to stay on those benefit plans. If you're doing SSDI, you're applying for Social Security disability insurance benefits, they will oftentimes put you on a public insurance. And that process varies sometimes, but you may be eligible for public insurance. And if you're in a state like Massachusetts, that's a really great option, actually.
So another question probably relates a little bit to one of the previous ones, but if you have a small tumor that hasn't been graded, can you apply, or how do you go about applying?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you absolutely can apply, right? If you meet all the other eligibility requirements. But what we're really talking about are qualifications here. So again, it goes back to function. I can't say it's identical to, but it's similar to a grade 1 or grade 2 glioma, in that we're really talking about how this impacts your life, how it impacts your functioning, how it has changed your ability to do or not do certain things in your life. And I think, while it may add another layer of complexity in terms of like the diagnosis isn't exactly clear, a radiology report and a neuro-oncologist or whoever you see for your care detailing in their note, this is what we think it is based on the radiology report, that holds weight. So if they can describe in detail, what they think that this tumor could be, that could support your case as well. So I think it's a dual thing. Again, you're going to want to talk to your medical professional, tell them, hey, I'm thinking about doing this because I don't have pathology. I'm wondering if you could just, in my next note, kind of reiterate what you think is going on with this tumor based on the radiology or whatever it is that you have access to. And then also talking about the functional status changes.
So we have another question from someone that has a sort of a very demanding job. They have a grade 3 glioma. They went back to work after short-term disability and has been able to, do well on the job. With long-term disability, if they could no longer perform sort of their high-level job, would they qualify for long-term disability, even though they could do another job but not get paid as much in the current role? So does that come into play when they're trying to get their 70% long-term disability insurance?
Yeah, that's a really great, important question. I tell my patients to think about it like this. Short-term disability and long-term disability are benefits that you have paid for already. Like your working that you have done has granted you the ability to benefit from these supports. So I would say, absolutely, if you meet the eligibility and qualifications, regardless of what your next move is, like don't think past the time off. We're just talking about this time off here. You should be able to, if you have, like you haven't used your long-term disability, you have a bank of time that you can use. I would encourage you to pursue it, and you can think about your next step while you're on that time off. What you do after your short-term, long-term disability, let's say you file for FMLA and PFMLA in conjunction to, that is something that can be determined at a later point. You do not need to know whether you're going back or not. I have patients who file and they don't go back to their job, but they take several months of those benefits. So I hope that helps.
So I think we're pretty much at our time. We tried to behave and stick to our 45 minutes. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for an amazing presentation, Rachel. And we are, please, if you have other questions, you can email us and we will get back to you. There's some links in the chat, but also glioma@yale.edu. And then Rachel, I think you also listed another email as well.
Yeah,
so we're happy to get back to you. And all of this is taped. We'll put it on our gliomaregistry.org website. It might take us a day or two to do that, but the slides will be available. The webinar is available as well.
Thank you both, Dr. Claus and Rachel, for this informative and very valuable presentation. As mentioned, this session is recorded and it will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist as well as our Blum Digital Resource Center. Thank you everyone who was able to join us, and have a great day.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you both. Thank you everyone. Bye.